This is Catch 22 Minutes. Hello everyone, this is Stella, Head of Policy and Campaigns for Catch 22. The independent review of children's social care, which was headed by Josh McAllister and published in May 2022, had a final report and a recommendation which included that the government should make care experience a protected characteristic. A new legislation should be passed which broadens corporate parenting responsibilities across a wider set of public bodies and organizations. At Catch 22, this is now one of our manifesto asks for the next general elections. Many care experienced people face discrimination, stigma, and prejudice in their day to day lives. Public perceptions of care experience center on the idea that children are irredeemably damaged and that can lead to discrimination and assumptions being made. With me to discuss this today, and more specifically, the campaign to make care experience a protected characteristic, is Terry Galloway, a campaigner for equal opportunities for people who are in or have experience of care, and Hannah McCowen, manager of the National Living Care Benchmarking Forum. I would like to start with you, Terry, and if you could tell me a bit more about yourself, why you campaign on this issue, what's your background, and what do you do?
So my name's Terry Galloway, and I am the co-founder of Terry the Offer. I also run a housing association providing housing and jobs programs for care leavers, and also an estate agency. And I'm a trustee of Become, and also a trustee of NYAS. I started the campaign in a nutshell because the care system is broken, and it was a kind of promise to my sister that I made one time when we'd just left a funeral and we were in her flat, and she was telling me, Terry, I don't want to die, I don't want to be next. I tried to give her some hope because at that point in time she'd lost her children to the care system. She was heavily addicted to drugs and alcohol. And I tried to really give her hope that, you know what, let's use our trauma, let's use what we've been through for the positive and make it so that it has meaning, and that we can change the system for the better for other people. But unfortunately, she was next and she got murdered by her boyfriend in a domestic violence incident. So at the time of making that promise, we didn't know what it was we was going to do. We didn't know what would be the catalyst or what would be the single issue, the single thing that could potentially change the care system. But now we found it, which is why I'm running this campaign.
Thanks for sharing, Terry. This is an amazing story, and I'm so glad that you are honoring your sister's memory by doing this campaign. Hannah, would you like to introduce yourself as well? And then I would like to ask both of you a bit more about the rationale behind the campaign and how it's been developing. So, Hannah, if I could jump over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Stella. Yeah, I'm Hannah. I manage the National Leaving Care Benchmarking Forum for Catch 22. And the forum is made up of 132 leaving care teams across England. So over 85% of leaving care teams across England are represented. And the aim of the forum is really to share good practice and to improve the services and support that young people receive as they leave care. And right at the heart of what we do is our Young People's Benchmarking Forum, which is made up of care experienced young people. And we really want to raise their voices and their priorities and shape our work around that. And this is one of the areas that they've definitely spoken up about getting the protected characteristic for care experienced people. And also there's wide support across our steering group, which is made up of leaving care managers as well.
So, NLCBF is a very important organization for connecting policymakers with people with experience of care and making their voices heard. Terry, if I could start with you, can you tell me what was the rationale behind campaigning to make care experience a protected characteristic? You've already mentioned why you started campaigning on this issue, and you have this very powerful personal story. Could you tell me a bit more about the rationale for the specific policy ask of making care experience a protected characteristic? Why is it that this specific ask would help people like yourself and your sister and the people that you campaign for?
I think that the biggest thing that this is going to do for care experienced people is give them voice in places where they've never been heard before. Because we're here in this chat now, and we understand the care system. We're part of the care system bubble, but outside of that bubble, where all the barriers and all the discrimination is happening against care experienced people, it's those people that need to be hearing our voice. It's those people that when they create policy and they design services for care experienced people, it's those people that need to be taking account of us and our barriers. So, with a protected characteristic within the Equality Act 2010, it basically means that when decisions are being made or systems are being designed, that they have to do what's known as an equality impact assessment. And that equality impact assessment is the mechanism that people outside the care system bubble understand, because they've had it since 2010. They're already doing and they already have these systems in place. One of the big things that the government are trying to say is that strengthening corporate parenting is going to fix this problem of stigma. But it's not just a problem of stigma in terms of direct discrimination, like you're too smart for a care kid, or you're not going to be able to handle this job because you'd be off all the time because you got loads of trauma from growing up in care. That kind of stuff is direct discrimination. But when we talking about systemic system design, we need to be heard and we need to be seen within that policy. So that's really why I'm really pushing on the protected characteristics, because inside that policy, that's where the system can get changed. And in terms of the corporate parenting, that definitely goes hand in hand. And I 100% support the government in strengthening that. But we only have to look to Scotland to see that actually corporate parenting's been in Scotland since 2014, and it hasn't created the systemic change that we need. The other point to make on this is that this is actually a reserved matter for Westminster. So protected characteristics not only affects England, it also affects Scotland and Wales. So this campaign is a UK wide campaign.
So basically, you are saying that making it a protected characteristic would force the government and organizations and local government uh, to take this into account.
Yeah, it will. It'll force them. It'll provide the mechanism as well, because the reality is people generally care, and it's not until they become aware of what's actually going on that they'll empathise, and then we'll get a cultural shift. We'll get a change in attitudes towards care experienced people, which will automatically reduce the stigma. But the other big great thing about it is the fact that the people carrying out the equality impact assessments outside of the care system bubble have other priorities. So when they've got those other priorities, they're not going to be able to help themselves but use the mitigations that they use for care experienced people for their ordinary clients and customers. So in effect, we'll get systemic change and equitable equality for all as a result. And that'll mean that care experienced people won't have to wave this flag to say I'm care experienced to benefit from a change in system design.
And how, in what ways are care experienced people different from other people? Why should people with experience of care have this distinct mechanism to help them? Why do they need the extra support?
it it's what it is. We need equitable access to equality. Care experienced people didn't decide for themselves to go into care. It kind of happened for them. It wasn't a choice, and because of that, then there is barriers out there and there's systems that really push against care experienced people. Care experienced people are 70% more likely to die than any prematurely than any other group. And when you do the numbers, that's 20 years on average off our lifespan. It's a real big issue. We're dying out there, and the problem is when we die, outside of the care system bubble, it's never really attributed to the trauma and the barriers that we face as care experienced people. When my sister was murdered, there was not a single mention of care experience in all the press that came as a result. So when you kind of look at these real horrific headlines outside of the care system bubble, in a lot of times it's a care experienced person that's behind those headlines. So we've got to stop this from, we've got to stop this.
So, what is it about care experience? And Hannah, if you would like to come in here as well, what is it about care experience that makes life so much more difficult?
I think there's a lot of things here, Stella, and some can be due to sort of trauma that people may have faced before they came into care, or the reasons why they came into care, but also just being in the care system can be quite traumatic in itself. We then expect young people leaving care to become independent far earlier than their peers, to become financially independent after the age of 18. And even though leaving care teams, there is support up to the age of 25, we're putting young people in challenges that, the average young person now leaves their own parents' home at the age of 27. So we're in a completely different challenges there. I think also just a lot of the challenges that leaving care professionals find is outside of the council, like those other government departments and public bodies, like the mental health services, like housing, the Home Office around supporting unaccompanied asylum seeking young people. They don't necessarily understand those challenges. And that's where, getting the protected characteristic and also um, getting the corporate responsibilities in place would really help. So I think, yeah, the challenges are sort of like they're right across young people's lives. And obviously we see care experience people doing amazing things. We work with fantastic young people in our young people's benchmarking forum. um, I think, especially at the moment with the cost of living crisis, like we've done a big piece of work around that. We've spoken to over 450 young people, and just the impact that that's having on this group of young people is massive in terms of mental health, in terms of being able to sustain accommodation, being able to keep in touch with friends and family. So all of those sort of big challenges that we're all facing are impacting care experience young people even more.
And Terry, do you find politicians are receptive to that message? Do you find them being convinced this is a policy that it's worth it for them to pursue?
I do. With the campaign so far, we've got 63 councils that have now passed the motion. When you look at the numbers, that's 33% of the UK population is now living in a council area, geographical area that treats care experience as if it were a protected characteristic. So there's very much an understanding there. But there is still a lot of work to do because we can't. Although it is a campaign, we have to demonstrate the impact of what and really do some equality impacts assessments in areas of policy that we can really demonstrate better outcomes and saving money. Because the reality is every child that comes into care cost the state £1.2 million, and the problem is when they cost the state that money, it's not necessarily the person who's delivering the service at the beginning that saves that money. So until you can see the bigger picture of what's going on, like we did a model the other day for a housing association, what an equality impact assessment might look like for a housing association, and the start of the process is where the housing association wants to change its design or come up with a new policy, and that policy was to reduce evictions and reduce antisocial behaviour. So as part of their system design, they do an equality impact assessment at the beginning and find that care experienced people are disproportionately represented in those ASB numbers and the eviction numbers. So what that then means is that this housing association, who has no corporate parenting responsibilities at the moment, and also doesn't, basically this housing association then goes off to hear the voice of care experienced people, and then they find out that actually they're isolated. They find out that people are taking advantage of them because they move into properties where they're not fully furnished or they've not got curtains up and stuff like that. So people might come and offer to put curtains up and then end up moving into the property and then selling drugs and causing antisocial behaviour. So when we modelled this particular journey of a case study of a care leaver, it turns out that from the age of 18, the cost to the state for a 3-year period was £232,000. Okay. So the actual money for the housing association was around £6,800 what they would have saved. But by doing the equality impact assessment, they realised that if they put in a mentoring scheme plus a jobs programme plus a bit of a maintenance programme for that care leaver, which would have cost £10,400, then the total spend would have been £37,000 with a net saving of £195,000. And we've got all this on a diagram there. Now, for normal voters, for the general population out there who are watching their councils go bankrupt and they're driving along roads with potholes, where do they think that money is actually going to at the moment? It's going into the care system. So if we can fix the care system, then those voters can start having their potholes filled in.
There are so many examples in public policy about where prevention would have been so much cheaper and would have worked so much better in the long run. I was reading the other day how basically having someone incarcerated costs more than sending them to Eton,
Yeah, yeah.
which just makes you think if only we had invested this money to begin with. Of course, there are people who are violent, who should be in prison, and there is nothing you can do about it. But how many people are languishing in prisons because they were never given the right opportunities to begin with?
One of the big things with having it as a protected characteristic is the equality monitoring. Yeah. So at this moment in time, the government are trying to make this argument that care experienced people will feel stigmatized if it becomes a protected characteristic. Yeah. Now, the Equality Act was designed to reduce stigma. Okay. So one of the big things that these system designers, that I'm going to call them, is they don't actually know. We've asked the government how many people are on universal credit, for instance, that are care experienced, yeah, and they don't know. People who are running these services don't actually know who's care experienced. When they realise that actually disproportionately in some of these places like prison, like NHS, like mental health services, for care experienced people of all ages, they're going to find that we're disproportionately represented. And once they realise that, it's about what's in it for me. Everybody has their own agenda. So if you're running a service outside the care system bubble and you realise that most of the people that you're serving are care experienced, then you're going to take an interest. Yeah. So with a protected characteristic, you can do equality monitoring, which is not putting a tag on somebody. It's just literally asking the question confidentially and not basically attributing what you say to your file, as it were. So when you apply for a job, you'll have a separate form that says this is confidential. It doesn't go with your paperwork. It gets taken away. And that's purely so that they can see who have those protected characteristics in their service. And once we get that, then it's going to change.
If it's not measured, it's not improved. Terry, I'm very glad I invited you to this podcast because I was actually skeptical about making care experience a protected characteristic until recently, because for me it sounded like one of these things that can be just a checking exercise, just one more thing, just something symbolic rather than something that would bring about actual change for the quality of life of people with care experience. But the way you describe it is very convincing because yes, you are quite right. Once we start realizing the impact and you make the connection between all the other services, then you can make a better case for why you need to improve the opportunities for people with care experience. Hannah, sorry, is there anything you would like to add as well to this point, Hannah?
I think like something that me and Terry have spoken about, and it comes up all the time, is just making sure where councils are adopting protected characteristic that it means something, and then it gets taken forward. And I know Terry's doing like loads of work in this area in terms of bringing councils together to say this is how to take it forward. that's what young people are saying to us is, what difference is it making? That's what local authorities are saying to us is, what difference is it making? And that's what we need to keep pushing towards, is saying, right, you've got the protected characteristic in place now in your local authority. What does that mean? And making sure that's carried through.
Yeah, it's absolutely crucial that we get impacts from this, because we've been let down enough times. We've been promised change enough times throughout the decades. So it's absolutely crucial that impact comes from it. And the thing that's quite inspiring to me, and I'm buzzing thinking about it, is that this is actually bigger. This is bigger than care experience people. This is about equality for all, because to get the impact that we need and the impact that we deserve, we're going to have to change culture in how we approach system design. We're going to have to empower, because ultimately this is going to come down to government. This is going to come down to political will to change the system, and that. But what we have to do is give them and empower them with the information and the resources that they need to make those real crucial decisions. Because in that equality, like, I've got a big diagram of that case study and that journey, showing all the costs, all the individual costs. And for Stacey, where it was £232,000 from 18, that included 3 domestic violence incidents, 17 ASB incidents, DWP, universal credit, supported accommodation, complex eviction. So we mapped it all out. Yeah. But for the actual housing association, the saving is very small. Yeah. So therefore, it doesn't make fiscal sense for the housing association to introduce that policy. So we're only going to get a better system design if you can see clearly, visually, what's being affected by it. And then the politicians can come together cross government to kind of change and implement the policy that we're going to need. And when they do that, they're going to do it for everybody, not just care experienced people. So in a way, this is just an excuse to change and become a better society for all.
That's a great argument to close, Terry. Thank you very much for joining us, and thank you, Hannah, as well. To learn more about Catch-22's manifesto, check out the link in our show notes. If you liked this episode, please rate, follow, and leave us a review. Thank you.